Perfect. All right, welcome everyone. Tor Performance presents Choosing the Right Super Shoe. All right, I want you all to rewind back to 2016. I know, a long time ago, pre-COVID. It's a fog. The 2016 Rio Olympics, where an unassuming but revolutionary shoe reshaped the future of distance running. You see all three male marathon medalists cross the finish line wearing these bright yellow Nikes, but nobody knew there was a carbon plate in those shoes. Those were the unbranded Nike Vaporfly 4%. They were the first shoe to utilize a PEBA-based foam with a carbon fiber plate. In 2017, those shoes became available to the masses, and since then, they've been a game changer. I should say, running shoes have all been game changers, not just the Nikes. Today, we're not just talking about shoes. We're talking about performance enhancing propulsion systems, biomechanical engineering, and innovation that blurs the line between human effort and technological advantage. This isn't just reserved for elites, though. Whether you're hunting down your first BQ, trying to break 4 hours, chasing a Kona slot, or just trying to find those final seconds of your PB, there's a shoe that can help you run like you're breaking the rules. Tonight, we're going to explore super shoes, how they're reshaping the sport, and how you can help find the right shoe for you. Before we dive into the science and strategy of these super shoes, I want to introduce the coaches behind tonight's session. Tor Performance was founded in 2012. We're based in Phoenix, Arizona, and we are a premier endurance coaching collective trusted by first-time finishers, age group podiums, and professional athletes alike. We specialize in triathlon, running of all distances from 5K to, well, Bryce, 250 miles. So that's quite the spectrum, and cycling, and of course, swimming. Our coaches deliver more than just training plans. We deliver sustainable high performance without compromising your non-negotiables. If you have any questions along the way, feel free to drop us a message in the chat. But after the show, please drop us a note on our website or on Instagram. Tonight, we're going to be joined by Austin Wheat, Dr. Scott Ellis, Dr. Whitley Atkins, Pablo Gomez, and myself, Jason Lenski. So let's start it out. What are super shoes? Well, what we have here on the bottom of the slide, apologies for the photo editing error there, but this is the Metaspeed Sky. I'm sorry, this is the new Metaspeed Ray that hasn't quite dropped yet. I think it's dropping next month, but it just goes to show how quickly these shoes are innovating. So what makes a super shoe super? So whether it's a Nike, an Adidas, a Puma, an On, a Hoka, a Saucony, they all utilize a core blueprint around three key technological pillars. First, a high energy return midsole foam. So, of course, the carbon fiber is in there, but the magic is in the foam. This foam is engineered for maximum propulsion and reduced joint strain. Most brands are using a PEBA-based foam like a Pebax, which is ultra responsive but less durable than EVA. So you're not going to get as many miles out of the shoe. And they're just magical. They're extremely bouncy. Others opt for something called a supercritical EVA, which is used by infusing EVA with actually nitrogen. I know Brooks does that, or carbon dioxide. The advantage of a supercritical EVA over PEBA is durability. So you may find like a super trainer with a supercritical EVA because it's just going to last longer. So maybe not the same snappiness as a PEBA, but you are getting a much longer durability. The second pillar is obviously the carbon fiber plate. So it's going to act like it sounds, like a springboard, and it's embedded in the midsole. So it's going to increase energy return with every stride by stiffening the shoe and providing forward propulsion. And it's also going to help reduce muscular fatigue, especially in the longer events, once we get beyond 21K and even beyond 42K. Lastly, the third is the rocker geometry. So the rocker geometry is designed to reduce ankle flexion and guide the foot into a more efficient rolling pattern. This is going to promote forefoot strike, a smooth toe off, and ultimately conserve energy by optimizing stride mechanics and forward momentum. So each brand really applies principles with its own unique twist, whether it be proprietary foam, different shapes of carbon rods or carbon plates. But at the end of the day, they're all trying to push boundaries of human performance from distances on the track, 400, 800, 1600 meters, all the way to the marathon and beyond. So next, we're going to dive into what makes up the anatomy of these super shoes.
Yeah, so as Jason touched on, super shoes reduce the energetic cost of running. What this essentially means is it allows athletes to run faster and longer with less effort. A lot of people, especially in the past, have gotten caught up in the carbon plate. But really, the key feature, as Jason also touched on, is the proprietary foams that we see these shoe manufacturers come up with. Nike with the Zoom X, Adidas with Lightstrike Pro. But really, that foam, it cushions impact while returning energy efficiently. There's also added tech in there, like we can look at the Alpha 5 3. It has AirPods in the forefoot that amplify rebound. So we look at factors like that and the foam, but energy return is really it's more than just bounce. It's a variety of factors that really come together to sync with the gait cycle. One of those being additional support, which is where the carbon plates or rods in some cases provide structure to prevent instability from the soft, thick foams, especially at the higher stack heights that we see now. And so you take all of those and you put them in and combine them with the wafer thin uppers. These shoes are typically extremely light, and that further increases running economy. Next slide. And so when we talk about stack height, what this really refers to is how much shoe material sits between the ground and your foot. So recently, we've seen a massive inflation of that stack height. Now, 40 millimeters is very, very common in super shoes, especially among those that are race legal. Some do go beyond that 50 millimeter, or go up to 50 millimeters, maybe even beyond. On the screen here, we can see the Prime X Strung 2, Brooks Glycerin Max, and then the On prototype. We can look back to that Gustav Eden wore back in Kona a few years ago. Um, and then looking back even further, I think the first time we really start to see these higher stack heights come through was in the original Hoka Clifton. It's 32 millimeters, and that used to be considered really, really high. So it's interesting to see how these stack heights have come a long way, especially with the foam technology. And so, with that, these taller shoes, they do come with trade-offs. They can be a little bit heavier, they're less stable, really, and require an exaggerated rocker design. These features shift the mechanical load up the chain from the ankle into the knees and hips. And that shift can really increase demands on your proximal strength, especially in the glutes and hip flexors, which is something I've personally felt, looking back to when I first started wearing super shoes back in, what was that, Jason? 22.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, definitely felt that. And so with athletes that lack strength and control in those areas, these shoes have the potential to cause more harm than good. Um, and looking at a little bit further, they also alter movement patterns, often promoting a more forward tipping posture and forefoot strike. We'll touch on this in a more detail a little bit later, but that increased instability with the stack heights, with the soft foams, it can raise the risk of injury, particularly when fatigued. Keeping all of that in mind, really, we think that the future frontier with these super shoes is with the foam technology and not more stack height. The current shoes that we do have are already pushing those limits of practicality as we see it right now. Next slide. And so we can move a little bit forward and look at, we can talk about regulations. Yeah, I just mentioned that original On prototype that Gustav wore in Kona in 2022. That was a really big tipping point, I think, for this conversation. World Athletics, the governing body for track and road racing, they enforce a 40 millimeter stack height limit on competition legal shoes. This rule is now followed by Ironman and World Triathlon, meaning it applies to most sanctioned endurance events. Really, shoes exceeding this are considered non-compliant and cannot be worn in record-eligible races or certain championships. I believe there are currently 18 shoes on the market that exceed this 40 millimeter limit. A key example here is the Hoka Skyward X, boasts a stack height that's about 48 millimeters. And it features a plush foam and embedded tech, ideal for reducing that fatigue, like we had talked about, especially over long distances. But rules are rules, and we can look back actually to February of this year. Ultramarathoner Rajpal Panu won the USA TF 100-mile road championships, but he was disqualified for wearing the Hoka Skyward X. A little bit of an oversight, I think. But he is a sponsored Hoka athlete and a high school math teacher, which really makes the story resonate a little bit more because it shows that even serious athletes are still navigating these new gray areas. So, as the shoes continue to evolve, governing bodies, athletes, brands will all need to balance out the performance games with integrity and competition. Handing off to you, Whitley.
Hoka did still pay Raj the performance incentive, so I think it was just a big marketing play. Worked
Well,
out.
there you go.
Whitley, take us away.
Okay, so we've talked about this great marketing here as well as things being banned, then we can assume that they work. But I think the question is how effective are super shoes? So I'm going to highlight a research study out of North Central College in Illinois that aimed to compare running economy, and they used oxygen consumption to measure that running economy across different carbon plated ratios. They had a control shoe as well. So this was just a normal run shoe without any carbon plating in it. And let me give you a brief physiology lesson here is that when we use oxygen consumption as a surrogate for running economy, the premise is that the less oxygen used, the more economical a runner is. Ideally, this should translate to faster speeds and reduce perception of effort. So we want oxygen consumption when we're comparing these different models to be lower. That would be the more effective shoe. The researchers expected that the Nike Next Percent 2 to demonstrate the highest efficiency, and then followed by the ASICS Metaspeed Sky, the Adidas Adios Pro 3, Saucony Endorphin Pro 2, and then, of course, lastly, that shoe that had no carbon in it, the control shoe. They had participants complete a VO2 max test followed by randomized shoe trial. So each participant, I believe there was 4 collegiate runners. They ran in each shoe for 5 minutes with 5 minutes recovery. And then the final 2 minutes of each one of those 5 minutes was used for data analysis. And I just briefly went over this, but this is a very brief study, but it was effective. And what the researchers found were that all carbon plated shoes significantly outperformed that control shoe in both oxygen consumption. So the best shoe, which happened to be the Nike Next Percent 2, was the least oxygen consumed. And all the carbon shoes did bring down that oxygen consumption, so maximize efficiency. However, the difference between the shoes was relatively small. The conclusion was that, yeah, hey, these carbon plated shoes enhance running economy when we compare them to a running trainer. There's marginal performance difference once we're at a certain level. Something to note is that this was demonstrated over a very short amount of time. So we're looking at 2 minutes of data analysis. So as you can imagine, if you look at 2 minutes and there's a significant difference in that energy conservation or that oxygen consumption, think about how that is extrapolated over half marathon, marathon times, and we can see that this is a significant saver of energy and oxygen consumption. Next slide.
Well, I just want to throw a quick little tag on for this slide. One of the interesting parts about this was these were all tested on national championship level cross country runners that were doing high volume everyday training on all terrain. A lot of it was going to be out on dirt trail, and as Whitley pointed out, a lot of this kind of carried over. The testing was done short intervals on the treadmill. And so most of the shoe wear that these runners had been using were only due to it was switching over from what they're used to wearing, because they were used to wearing more all-terrain shoes, wearing more of kind of the outdoor shoe that we see, not what you're going to see more on a stable base. And the numbers were a little bit lower because the school apparently could only afford to buy one size across the board. So they basically could, their big inclusion criteria was people, I think it was a size 9.5, was the only people who could be in it were cross country runners that had a size 9 shoe. So that's one of the other reasons that some of the numbers were a little bit lower on it.
Fair.
All right. So the study we went over, Scott added his knowledge of that study as well. But the thing with super shoes is they aren't guaranteed magic. The reason being is it comes down to how the foam in the shoes works. So much of the running economy advantage, again, that lower O2 consumption comes from compressing the foam and then having that energy returned. So the faster runner is, the more powerful a runner is, the more return that runner will have. So the shoe is not necessarily creating any energy, it's just returning the energy that normally would be dissipated into the ground back into your gait. Next slide, Jason. So I think that, we're going back to this illustration of running economy, and that, again, improved economy results in lower O2 consumption. So to optimize performance, individualization is really important here. For example, if you have poor biomechanics in a really fast shoe, you're going to lead to uneven foot strikes, maybe some ankle instability. And each one of these non-perfect issues that happens in a gait is going to lead to more energy expenditure and then again, more O2 consumption. So this is basically resulting in a much less efficient foot strike, which then leads to slower speeds. So I think what this really comes down to, and what we want to, instill in you guys listening, is that it comes down to what shoe's best for you. And not to forget about the other 98% that goes into prepping for a race. So consistent training, good nutrition, good sleep, and injury prevention as well.
Yeah. Scott, run us through what we should consider in terms of choosing the right super shoe for the athlete, and what are some of the pitfalls that we need to avoid?
Absolutely. So, as we've kind of been touching on with these first couple slides, there's quite a bit of research to show that there's a lot of upsides to these shoes, but we need to be careful in how we're approaching them and what we're buying, and not falling victim to the what looks fancy on social media and what the guy in the lane next to me is running with. And I really want to kind of highlight one of the things that Whitley just said was, if you have inaccuracies with your foot strike, if you have any kind of injuries, you have any type of compensation pattern, and we put you into this super shoe, all that's going to do is exacerbate and kind of shine a light on what's going on. For those of us that are on this, that spend time in aero bars or on an aggressive bike for triathlon, very similar, that we've seen that just because you get a very aggressive bike fit doesn't mean that if you can't maintain the appropriate bike fit and be in that position that they put you in, and you're having to adjust how you're sitting, then all was for naught, and you would have been better seated on something that's more appropriate for how you're going to ride. So same thing here. If we need to get you into a shoe that feels right and is appropriate for what your form, what your position, are you an overpronator? Are you a stability shoe? Is that appropriate for your foot? And then we start looking into what's the best stylish shoe within that. So a couple things that we see on this list here that we're going to talk about is a little bit of a buyer beware of things to make sure we're avoiding. So first of all, I think we all know this, but it kind of goes without saying that buying for brand or buying for hype, looking for, what does, what are we seeing as the top runners at coming across at Boston, coming across at New York, coming across in Tokyo, or what's the fastest guy at the track workout wearing? I need to be in that same shoe. So making sure that you are buying for appropriate for your fit and for your need. That second bullet on there, again, tying right back into what Willie was saying, is we really want to make sure we're not ignoring that fit or that ride feel. We've seen that, a lot of those numbers show that if if you're not feeling good in that shoe and your fit doesn't feel proper, and you're changing your stride length, you're changing your cadence because you're not really able to find that fit, and you're trying to kind of put that square peg in that round hole in your running form, all that's going to do is just make you that much more inefficient. And all that money that we just spent on super shoes is kind of going out the window there. We want to understand that, those next two bullets kind of go together. we don't run in super shoes for your every Sunday run as we're going through. There's a quite a bit of a shelf life on these shoes. We want to make sure we're protecting them, that we are making sure that your body is able to absorb that difference in foam. They are going to break down quicker than your everyday trainers that you're running in. So making sure that we're smart with our runs, but we're also not only running with them on race day. We all know the old adage: we never want to try something new that we've never done before. So don't go buy a set of super shoes and leave them in a box until race day to try to salvage them. But we also don't want to run 100 miles a week for 12 weeks ramping up to a marathon in those. So understanding that we want to have a similar shoe as our main trainer, and then as race day approaches, we're going to do one or two kind of training runs in that shoe just to make sure you feel good at most. But that's kind of talking to your coach, figuring out where you want to go from there. The other ones that we want to look at, again, we talked to some of those downsides, but the other big thing that we need to take a peek at is not only from an efficiency on how your body works, but also, do you have any other injuries? Do you have any other compensations that you need to worry about? Obviously, Jason knows he can't put me in front of a microphone without me talking about injuries. So when we look at some of these super shoes, they can have a tendency to change where your foot strike is, how you pronate, how you supinate, where you're going to find that weight distribution. So if we get you into some of these shoes that are the inappropriate one for you, you are going to be at a higher risk of developing some of those foot and ankle pathologies, those knee pathologies that unfortunately can sideline you. And then that's obviously the last thing we want. Much more of a big red flag than having a slower run or an inefficient run is having an injured run. So we want to make sure that not only from an efficiency standpoint, we find this right shoe as we're going through, from making you healthy and happy at that start line. So you see on that right side, you see kind of a quick breakdown of what your kind of rotation of your shoes may look like as you're going through. But there's a couple examples of what that looks like, but having differences between what shoes you're wearing on your long run, what shoes you're doing for your kind of your short, maybe your speed work, your tempo runs, and then what you're sliding into for your race day.
Yeah, that's great. And in this example from this is pretty much all of ASIC's new super shoes and trainers. They're all pretty high stack. I would even encourage the athlete to throw in something like just a traditional Nike Pegasus or a New Balance Rebel 4, just so that you can vary the stack. Because by varying the stack and drop, you're going to activate different stabilizers and foot muscles, promoting overall durability and neuromuscular balance. I feel like, yes, these shoes are all going to feel incredible, especially that Super Blast 2 on your 15-mile run. But it's pretty plush and soft, and I feel like you may be just overloading certain muscles and tendons and just asking for trouble by not varying the drop and just sticking with super high stack shoes for every one of your runs each week. Now, don't get me wrong, like running in these shoes is incredibly fun, and that's what we want. But we also don't want to take 10 steps back and have you on the shelf with uh, you name it. Scott's seen all my injuries. So they can populate if you just neglect proper shoe rotation, and you kind of get married to the super shoes for every run, because it's tempting, because it feels good and you see the paces. And we live in this Instagramification and the Strava society that every run wants to be fast. But take a step back, rotate your shoes, wear a non-super critical foam shoe, and just feel the run, feel the repetitive motion, and strengthen your feet.
Right. We all know, and we look at the kind of the macro view of our training. We wouldn't do every single run on the same stretch of road with no change in terrain, no change in rolling hills. We get variety in treadmill, trail, road. We get hills, we get uphills, downhills, we get flats, we get speed work. We want variety in our training on a more micro cycles. Exact same idea. We want variety in our footwear, like Jason said, because that's what's going to make sure that we're not overusing injuries. Helps with that mitigation of those overuse, wear and tear type things we can get, plantar fasciitis, IT band issues, patellofemoral syndrome, all those fun things, and it just helps keep us a little more well-rounded as a healthy athlete. So, let's go next slide.
Cool. So yeah, I wanted to talk through how we figure out you know, what shoes to choose. Sure, maybe you narrow it down to a couple, two or three, but not everyone has the luxury to order six super shoes. I mean, you're looking at for the $300 a pop, I don't want you dropping 2K just to try, the right shoe. I mean, by all means, I'm envious, but that's not the most efficient way. So I've come up with, what I kind of call my Toro field testing and, narrow it down to two. Okay. And go to your local, high school or community college track and do what I do what our athletes do. All it's going to involve is a time trial or pace-based repeat. You're going to run in different super shoes or over standardized intervals, so 3x2K or a 5K TT, and monitor that with a GPS, heart rate, and of course RPE. Feeling is everything in these shoes. You do one 400 in one shoe and another 400 in another super shoe. They feel completely different. One may be 1 or 2 seconds quicker, but I would go with the shoe that feels better, because we don't rip, quarters, well, some of you guys do, but most of you guys on this webinar race for much longer. So the benefits of testing on the track are real world conditions. It's going to help reveal shoe responsiveness across terrain, pacing changes and fatigue, and also evaluate subjective factors like comfort, stability, perceived effort. How hot is the shoe? Some of these shoes just do not breathe well. And it's also going to enable real-time head-to-head comparisons in race similar efforts. It's often more accessible than what we're going to get into next is lab testing. So we're fortunate here in the Valley to have Human Powered Health in Scottsdale. They do offer controlled shoe testing, which a couple of our athletes have taken advantage of. I look to do that in the future as I prep for my fall marathon. But what lab testing is going to involve is lactate and VO2 testing. So an athlete's going to run in multiple shoes at identical speeds while measuring oxygen consumption and blood lactate levels. Sometimes they'll pair it with a force plate treadmill or even a more motion capture to assess biomechanics. So that's certainly an advantage. It's going to be more objective than, say, running on the track and just using your GPS data. Essentially, lower VO2 at a given pace equals better running economy. So certainly more objective, and it's also going to identify energy savings across different shoe models. So it may help match which foam and plate and rocker profile are ideal for your biomechanics, right? Also may provide insight into fatigue resistance and muscular efficiency, especially for longer events. But bottom line, both protocols help runners select a shoe that offers the most propulsion, least energy costs, and greatest biomechanical, let's call it harmony. Lab testing is a little bit more precise, but I don't know. There's something fun about just going to the track as this athlete did, and you can just see the reps that they did. There were 1,600 meters followed by 800 meters in one shoe and the other shoe. In this particular case, they tested the Adios Pro 4 from Adidas and the Nike Vaporfly 3. Well, this was me. I don't have to lie. I'm was a huge Nike guy, like end all be all. Like I was drunk on the Kool-Aid. Like it was Nike till I die because they were sort of the innovators. Like every shoe who tried to match the Vaporfly from 2017 and beyond was junk. It just wasn't up to par. You had contracted athletes from other brands breaching their contracts so that they could run in Nikes. Like that's all I needed to know. So I was very hesitant and skeptical to try the Adidas Supershoe, but I was blown away. Like it was not only by the times and the changes, but it just felt so much more plush, so much more enjoyable of a ride for me. But that's just me and my foot strike. I've got a very forefoot dominant foot strike, so it may not be the same for somebody like Scott or Austin or Whitley or Pablo. So it's so important to try as many of these shoes as you can, and just do the field testing. Have fun with it. These are some of our picks, starting at the top, you can see that the new Puma Fast R Nitro Elite 3 and the Asics Metaspeed Sky Paris, going all the way down to what I would consider less aggressive super shoes. And by that, I mean, maybe the athlete who is not quite of a forefoot striker, maybe more midfoot or even heel. You may have better luck with the Cielo X1 2.0 or the SC Elite version 4 from New Balance, but it just goes to show this is only 8 of, geez, probably 15 super shoes out there at least. We're fortunate to have a great relationship with Roadrunner Sports. Take advantage of their return policy. If you're a VIP member, you can run in the shoes for, I think, up to 60 or even 90 days. I don't know. This is on the internet. Someone will correct me. But take advantage of that, running them on the treadmill, get a feel for them. And if you can tell a difference between one shoe at 5K pace and the other, like that's a huge advantage, and you save yourself a ton of money and just gained a lot of free speed. So yeah, we've all been rambling for 30 minutes now, but we want to open the floor for any questions you guys may have. Hit us. Whitley, I can't see the video screen, so if anybody is raising their hand or has a question, just maybe Whitley, you could call them out. So please, let's hear it.
Jason Toad, I got a question. I know we've talked a little bit kind of off camera about this, but I'd love to kind of get your thought on this for everyone to hear. So for runners that are using these shoes, have you seen any feedback or any research on these that where there's a like a almost like a weight capacity or a difference in body weight, body size, where say plucky 6'8", 260-pound Ginger was running in the shoes where we see kind of a different compressive load on the foam or on some of that carbon plating. Do you see any variation on those?
Yeah, I think that's just going to come down to the athlete. You in this case trying a few different models. I wouldn't put you in the lightest weight Puma Fast R3 that is designed for you know they're elite runners, and that tech is kind of cascading down for the everyday runner. I would start you out in the new A6. Gosh, the name slips my mind. I'm sorry. Oh, here we are. Is this it? Yeah. What type of runner are you? Perfect. Good segue, Scott. Thank you. So the
Oh,
Yaguri
not planted.
S4, the new A6 Yaguri S4 was designed, for the runner who may have that heavier foot strike. And so I would start there. The Brooks Hyperion Elite tends to be a little bit more forgiving, and even that new the original Hoka Cielo X1 1.0, I think would be the one for you. The 2.0, I haven't had much experience with, but just having run in them both and not, I run at about 170 pounds, so far from, uh, you know, a 120-pound runner. The Hoka Cielo tends to be pretty darn forgiving. I would start there for sure. As far as the studies go, I don't know. I'm sure we could find something. I'm sure we could find something, but I would just tell Lauren you got to buy 5 pairs. Sorry.
If I can find 5 pairs that are actually in my size, I may.
That's something we should explore. So, Scott, what size shoe are you? 15?
1640.
Yeah, that's tricky. So in this case,
You're
you
telling
know,
me.
yeah, and we've had this conversation before, Scott, but I would look into some of the super trainers from New Balance, Nike, or Adidas who don't have the carbon plate, but have that, nitrogen infused EVA or the PBAX
Relax foam.
foam. So you get
Yep.
the hyper responsive foam, but maybe they just don't have a plated shoe in that size because I mean they just wouldn't sell them, right? I think LeBron has a couple pair. You could probably hit him up, but those are probably one-offs.
Well, then that's the only thing that's keeping me from my 3 hour marathon.
Sub 3 hour.
Sub 3 hour. My bad.
Any questions from anybody?
I had one as a kind of a newer runner. With these big stack heights, if you're relatively new to running and you're dealing with things like overpronation and you're getting a lot of sort of undesirable like movement in your running form, is a big stack height something to be really careful about? Is that going to exaggerate sort of um, you know any lack of stability that you may have that you're still trying to develop?
Scott, do you want to take it?
Oh, sure. Yes, it can. Kind of as we were talking earlier, that Jason and Austin and even Whitley alluded to, is any instabilities in there in an aggressive shoe like this is just going to be exacerbated. So if you're getting into those kind of top tier shoes, you really want to make sure that you have good foot control, good balance, and good mechanics. Now, if you're getting into some of those kind of lower tier, like just talking about some of the super trainers, those are going to have a little more give to them. So people who do have a little more of the overpronation, or that may be more of a heel striker, more of a midfoot striker, or towing out, or any of these other compensations we can see. Then those are going to be a little more forgiving and have a little more gap in there. But if you are really in that spot where you're wanting to get in with uh, get into those more aggressive shoes and you're concerned about it, there's other things that we can do outside of the shoe wear, whether it's there's all the cross training and strength training, getting in with a physical therapist or an athletic trainer or anybody that's used to working with runners, getting into foot stability so that you don't need to rely on your shoe to have that stability, and you can kind of work on some of that intrinsically as well. It does help.
Will, what is your race shoe and what is your training shoe? I slipped my mind. I'm sorry.
They're one and the same currently. So I think it's the Saucony Hurricane or Tempest.
Yeah.
So it's still very new in terms of the idea of having like separate shoes for different functions is still something kind of new to me.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. So I think great because you're just going to be able to really feel the difference in the foams and the pronation control, and what shoe forces you to land more midfoot and towards your heel. So, we could stay in the Saucony family and just have you try the Endorphin Speed, which is a nylon plated super shoe, and then the Endorphin Pro is going to be their carbon plated super shoe. And those, I say that shoe because that Saucony lineup is going to be more of their more stable, inspire or more stability inspiring super shoes, whereas the Saucony Endorphin Elite is like their crazy radical shoe with zero motion control. I wouldn't have you do that. The stack height on that is pretty outrageous, but the Endorphin Pro and the Endorphin Pro Speed, I think would be a great starting point to kind of wet your beak and get a feel for, ooh, this technology is pretty cool, pretty helpful. But again, not being married to it because it feels so darn good on every run to use them, but to use them strategically.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Cool. Well, look, at the end of the day, the right shoe is the shoe that disappears beneath your foot. Let your fitness do the talking, trust your body, and let the shoe do its job. With that, I want to appreciate you guys for taking the time. If you're watching this on YouTube, please leave a comment or drop us a note at toroperformance.net or on Instagram. But yeah, thank you guys for taking the time. We hope you have a good evening and we'll see you at the races.